IIIiyin, I'd like to come to you first because you've seen it from both perspectives, being a health professional as a midwife and a mum too, and you experienced birth trauma yourself.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of start this. For those viewing this, it can be really difficult to hear about traumatic experiences. And so please do take this as a trigger warning for what you might hear and just protect yourselves first and foremost. For me, as someone who works in birth trauma, now privately, I feel that I have a kind of unique perspective, having lived it, but also having the knowledge of hearing those experiences day in, day out. I think that there is an element of too little, too late, but that doesn't mean that changes aren't essential. I think sometimes when we say it's too little, too late, we can think, well, just give up, but we can't give up. We can't give up for those who want to go on to have more children, for those who are recovering despite the fact that they may never have more children. So it's important that we make these changes and we make them faster than we have been.
Belle, let me come to you next, and I appreciate you may have to leave us to vote this evening. You've been through pregnancy yourself. You had issues with preeclampsia. But what I'd like to ask you about, especially as you chair that group that I mentioned at the start there, is health outcomes, as in so many cases, can be even worse for non-white women in this situation.
Yes, absolutely. We're seeing Black women up to 4 times more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth, and Asian and women of mixed heritage up to 3 times more likely to die in pregnancy and childbirth. It's an awful statistic, and we're really concerned that the government has still yet to set a target to bring about an end to this awful disparity. Really pleased that, due to evidence given by a number of organisations, including 5 times more, who are the Secretariat of the All Party Parliamentary Group on Black Maternal Health, that there is a commitment in the inquiry's recommendations to look at bringing down these disparities, but specifically looking at translation services to make sure that women are getting the opportunity to understand best what's happening to them if they are somebody for whom English is not necessarily their first language. But we can't continue to have this situation right across this country. We are meant to be one of the safest places to give birth, and we are, but as the 6th largest economy in the world, we cannot have the standard of maternity care that we currently have. It's absolutely unacceptable that in a country of this standing, we're seeing such a decline. And a lot of that has to do with a number of things, including, really huge issues in terms of staffing. We know that for every 30 midwives that are trained by the NHS, 29 actually end up going to leave the profession. How can we expect our midwives to deliver a service when they're overworked, underpaid, and put under such huge strain? And to add to this, one of the huge parts of the inquiry is to end the postcode lottery that we're seeing in terms of maternal health care. Where you give birth to your baby in this country shouldn't mean a greater or lesser outcome in terms of birth trauma.
Fiona, I think your daughter Holly is now 18, I'm right in saying. So you went through a traumatic birth, and sadly Holly was starved of oxygen as a result, which meant she's growing up with cerebral palsy. You must think 18 years on, how can this kind of thing still be happening to mums?
It's frightening, really. I mean, if I think of what we went through, and admittedly there were some changes made at our hospital because of what went wrong with Holly, but it's still to continue, as you said, 18 years on, and I can't see it at the moment changing, if I'm honest.
Does your heart sink when you hear these stories of bloody sheets and women being treated as an inconvenience, and also apparent cover-ups too?
Well, if I think that within Holly's case, the hospital spent 8 years denying it, I think in most cases, or a lot of cases, that is what happens, because it's a money-saving exercise to not pay anything, and then if it needs be, pay the least amount. And also, if I look back at it now, I know what the last 18 years have been like, and I know how tough it can be. And it's not something I'd wish on anyone, if I'm honest.
What is incredible about describing it as a money-saving exercise is it's doing anything but. In your case, you've been awarded what will total £15 million for Holly to be looked after. I know you would sacrifice all of that to go back and have things different at the time. But it's costing them a fortune.
Oh, it is. It's a lot of money. And there was, a lot of legal fees on top of that, just to debate it for 12 years. And then in the end, there's a big conversation about who's going to pay the legal fees and how much of it they'll pay. So it just goes on. Yeah, the costs are huge.
Laura, we talked about this last week, didn't we? A third of the NHS budget for maternity care, £1.1 billion, is going to settle negligence claims. When people hear these stories, they'll think, how can that be allowed to continue? Not only is it the human costs, as we heard with Fiona and Holly, but the financial costs as well, which is having huge knock-on effects.
It is, and interestingly, one of the experts who gave evidence to the inquiry was looking at the costing of what it takes to care for a woman properly, and it's a lot less than when you look at the huge amounts that are paid out in negligence claims. So, you know, if these injuries are spotted in time, if action is taken in time to help when things are going wrong, if everyone's supported properly, then you don't end up with clinical negligence. I mean, you can never eliminate risk from birth, from pregnancy, and I think everyone agrees that. But it's when things go wrong, and when things go wrong needlessly, these sorts of avoidable incidents are what are really costing the NHS a lot of money.
But we'll get on to now some of the potential solutions. But I know, Laura, you've spoken to the government, you've spoken to Victoria Atkins earlier on. What does she say?
Well, it's really interesting because she became Health Secretary before this had even popped up in Parliament as a thing. I mean, now, at least, I think we'll all agree, birth trauma is being talked about by people, politicians are engaging it, and you have the government making big promises about it. Whether or not that will bring about the kind of change that people want to see, that everyone agrees needs to happen, is the next big question, really. But, yeah, we sat down with Victoria Atkins, the Health Secretary, today, and put a lot of these points to her earlier on.